Good afternoon and welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from a Frontier, and thank you for stopping by. The article I wrote over the weekend was titled The Feedback Loop Phenomenon, and I was talking about the renminbi, about the response that the Chinese authorities have sent to Trump via the renminbi, the fact that Trump pulling the trigger on citing China as a currency manipulator is strange, because if anything they were manipulating it higher than its true value. So that has been published separately. Do have a look for that if you're interested. Otherwise, macro thoughts, $487 billion has flowed into fixed income funds this year, up from $148 billion in the first half of 2018, according to figures from Morningstar. And that's what I was talking about when I was talking about a Wizard of Oz world. And that's further evidenced by a new day, new record low yield. Germany's 10-year bond yield falls to minus 0.61%. As I've said several times this year, the most important currency to watch right now is the renminbi, and last on the offshore markets we're around just below 710. Home thoughts, this is a fabulous photograph from alias Da, 2 flamingos on Lake Nakuru. I've been reading and following a gentleman called Paul Salopek, who's been walking around the world, and he's now featuring some of his articles in the New Yorker. And I learned that Buddhism was born under a giant fig tree, which today grows at the center of the remote and unbeautiful town of Bodh Gaya in India's destitute northeastern state of Bihar. The tree is about 3 crooked blocks from the Be Happy Cafe and a few minutes walk from a used bookstore where a middle-aged Krishna devotee from Iowa named James works reselling old paperbacks by Hesse and Murakami. The sacred body tree is surrounded by a wall and guarded by police. I was looking at the poem William Blake's Sunflower. Ah, sunflower, weary of time, who countest the steps of the sun, seeking after that sweet golden clime where the traveller's journey is done? Where are the youth pined away with desire, and the pale virgin shrouded in snow? Arise from their graves and aspire where my sunflower wishes to go. And then I came across Sunflower Sutra by Allen Ginsberg, which is much longer, but equally worth reading. I walked on the banks of the Tin Can Banana Dock and sat down under the huge shade of a Southern Pacific locomotive to look at the sunset over the Box House Hills and cry. Jack Kerouac sat beside me on a busted, rusty iron pole. Companion, we thought the same thoughts of the soul, bleak and blue and sad-eyed, surrounded by the gnarled steel roots of trees of machinery. Very powerful, actually. I hadn't read much Ginsberg before, though I'd read about him. And on that point of sunflowers, this is Vincent van Gogh's Sunflowers, 4th version, yellow background, oil on canvas, which is in the National Gallery in London. Waning crescent, waxing gibbous, it raises the oceans and tugs at our thoughts. It still holds the key to madness, E.B. White wrote 50 years ago, still controls the tides that lap on shores everywhere, still guards the lovers who kiss in every land under no banner but the sky. Rather like that. According to one estimate, the combined GDP of cities across Asia will be greater than those of North America and Europe combined by 2027. Peter Frankopan, in his new Silk Roads, told me that the stock exchange opened in communist China in Shanghai in 1990. And the beginning of the Belt and Road was September 2013, when President Xi visited Kazakhstan and spoke of promoting people-to-people friendship and creating a better future. Another interesting point is China follows a 5-no approach: no interference in African countries' internal affairs, no imposition of our will on African countries, no attachment of political strings to assistance to Africa. Political reflections: Melania Trump holds a 2-month-old baby orphaned in El Paso. This photograph, of course, went viral. You can understand why. This was an orphan whose parents died protecting him. Does Trump do anything but watch TV and see that the lack of love is shown? Anything? What a bottomless pit of fatuous self-loathing and insecurity, tweeted C_Kinboat. McAfee: I was stunned by Epstein's suicide, though probably not as much as Epstein himself. People say he only smiles when he sees me, Trump speaking about Kim Jong-un. And I asked, maybe Khamenei just needs to write POTUS a letter. The Iranian Foreign Minister Mohammad Zarif accused the United States on Monday of turning the Gulf region into a matchbox, ready to ignite. And as I wrote in May this year, I said Iran is at the Hunter-S Thompsonian age. There is no honest way to explain it, because the only people who really know where it is are the ones who have gone over. Hong Kong airport cancelled all flights yesterday as protesters flooded the terminal. The move, in which protesters chanted slogans and criticised police for violence during rallies on Sunday, came as authorities in Beijing said the demonstrators had begun displaying early signs of terrorism. 17th of June, I said the periphery is a boil that will not be lanced. In this video footage from Global Times, the People's Armed Police have been assembling in Shenzhen, a city bordering Hong Kong, in advance of apparent large-scale exercises, videos obtained by the Global Times have shown. And indeed, the Tinderbox is the periphery. I went back to Adam Curtis and shape-shifting, an excerpt from Hypernormalization, and in that he touches on the political technologist Vladislav Surkov. Surkov is the real genius of the Putin era. Understand him and you understand not only contemporary Russia, but a new type of power politics, a breed of authoritarianism, far subtler than the 20th century strains. Talking of a ceaseless shape-shifting which is unstoppable because it is undefinable. They repeat the great mantras of the era: the president is the president of stability, the antithesis of the era of confusion and twilight in the 1990s. Stability, the word is repeated again and again in a myriad, seemingly irrelevant contexts, until it echoes and tolls like a great bell and seems to mean everything good. Anyone who opposes the president is an enemy of the great god of stability. Effective manager, a term quarried from Western corporate speak, is transmuted into a term to venerate the president as the most effective manager of all. Effective becomes the raison d'etre for everything. Stalin was an effective manager who had to make sacrifices for the sake of being effective. The words trickle into the streets. Our relationship is not effective. Lovers tell each other when they break up. Effective stability, no one can quite define what they actually mean. And as the city transforms and surges, everyone senses things are the very opposite of stable. And certainly nothing is effective. But the way Surkov and his puppets use them, the words have taken on a life of their own and act like falling axes over anyone who is in any way disloyal. And that made me jump to December 2016 when I wrote about how Trump is a linguistic warfare specialist. And in that article I was saying the first thing is plausible deniability, the second thing is non-linearity. I quoted Beppe Grillo, the comic turned leader of the Five-Star Movement, who said this is the deflagration of an epoch. It's the apocalypse of this information system, of the TVs, of the big newspapers, of the intellectuals, of the journalists. And he's right, traditional media, this is in December 2016, has been disrupted. And the insurgents can broadcast live and over the top, from feeding the hothouse conspiracy frenzy online, a constant state of destabilized perception, timely and judicious doses of WikiLeaks leaks which drained Hillary's bona fides and her turnout and motivated Trump's. What we have witnessed is something remarkable and noteworthy. One of Surkov's many nicknames is the political technologist of all of Rus. Political technologists are the new Russian name for a very old profession: viziers, grey cardinals, Wizards of Oz. He sponsored lavish art festivals for the most provocative modern artists in Moscow, then supported orthodox fundamentalists dressed all in black and carrying crosses, who in turn attacked the modern art exhibitions. He is an aesthete who pens essays on modern art, an aficionado gangster rap, keeps a photo of Tupac on his desk next to that of the president. Likes to invoke the new postmodern texts just translated into Russian, the breakdown of grand narratives, the impossibility of truth, how everything is only simulacrum and simulacra, and then in the next moment he says how he despises relativism and loves conservatism, before quoting Allen Ginsberg's Sunflower Sutra in English and by heart. It was the first non-linear war, writes Surkov in a new short story, Without Sky, published under his pseudonym, and set in a dystopian future and after the Fifth World War. In the primitive wars of the 19th and 20th centuries, it was common for just two sides to fight. Two countries, two groups of allies, now four coalitions collided. Not 2 against 2 or 3 against 1, no, all against all. In an editorial for the London Review of Books, quoted by Curtis, Peter Pomerantsev describes Putin's Russia thus: in contemporary Russia, unlike the old USSR or present-day North Korea, the stage is constantly changing. The country is a dictatorship in the morning, a democracy at lunch, an oligarchy by supper time. While backstage, oil companies are expropriated, journalists killed, billions siphoned away. Surkov is at the center of the show, sponsoring nationalist skinheads one moment, backing human rights groups the next. It's a strategy of power based on keeping any opposition there may be constantly confused, a ceaseless shape-shifting that is unstoppable because it's indefinable. Putin's system's also ripe for export, Surkov added. Foreign governments were already paying close attention, since the Russian political algorithm had long predicted the volatility now seen in Western democracies. Russia is playing with the West's minds, he writes. They don't know how to deal with their own changed consciousness. Watch Fox host Tucker Carlson call one of his guests a tiny brain, a moron, during an interview. It's very interesting. Dutch historian Rutger Bregman. Peter Navarro says the US will take strong action against China if it devalues the yuan to neutralize tariffs. China has devalued its currency by over 10% with the express purpose of neutralizing tariffs, full stop. Let's go to the currency markets. Euro dollar 111.91. We've spent quite a bit of time around here. 97.61 dollar index. Japanese yen 105.29. Swiss franc 0.9716. The pound 120.60. The Australian dollar 0.6766. India rupee 71.1665. South Korean won 1219.55. The Rial 398.49, Egyptian pound 16.59, and the Rand 15.2932. This is a long-term chart from Ed Conway at Sky. Here is an annotated chart of sterling since 1791. Dollar index, simple trends. What's been weighing on this index is the strength of the Swissy and the yen. Euro dollar, I think we go sub 110 once this bout of short covering of carry trades where people had borrowed in euro to buy the rand completes itself. Gold, that's on another move higher, 1524. It's been on a charge this year. Crude oil, $54.76. That's finding two macro gale force winds tugging in different directions. Geopolitical risk, the Strait of Hormuz, that kind of thing, versus demand destruction. Emerging markets, well, yesterday was extraordinary in Argentina. Argentina 100-year bond yields topped 12.57. That's from Sun Chartist. Took me back to an article I wrote in February 2018 about the end of halcyon days. And I was saying this is from the Latin Alcyone, who was the daughter of Julius and the wife of Sikhs. When her husband died in a shipwreck, Alcyone threw herself into the sea, whereupon the gods transformed them both into halcyon birds, kingfishers. When Alcyone made a nest on the beach, waves threatened to destroy it. Julius restrained his winds and kept them calm during 7 days in each year, so she could lay her eggs. These became known as the halcyon days, when storms do not occur. Today, the term is used to denote a past period that is being remembered for being happy and or successful. JP Morgan, emerging markets FX index, lowest level since September 2018. Argentina's Merval index fell 37%. The largest decline, one-day decline in its history. This was a 17 sigma event, which means that it should not have happened even once in the history of the universe. Argentine peso collapsed, down almost 25% at the opening. Now, notwithstanding the fact that it's down 90% since 2014, it's only minus 5% once you factor in the carry, which is a point that sometimes people forget when it comes to the shilling as well. Africa, President Kagame about the AFCFTA. How are we going to allow free movement of goods, but you don't allow free movement of people? And I was writing about this at the end of July when I said Africa is proudly moving counter-trend with the African Continental Free Trade Area. A silver bullet, particularly if we allow the free circulation of our people who are natural entrepreneurs. Harare, Zimbabwe, everywhere he looked, President Mnangagwa could see his own face. To battle his cold, he sipped a hot drink from a mug adorned with his own headshot. To his left, an aide wore a green shirt covered with the same image. To his right was a large photograph of the president as a young man. His state portrait hung from the opposite wall. In every society, oppositions will make accusations, he said. You need to deal with facts. We are now in a serious movement of economic reforms and political reforms, he said. He was a guerrilla fighter during the liberation struggle against white rule. Mnangagwa accompanied his predecessor to the negotiations that led to the creation of Zimbabwe in 1980. He later served as Minister for State Security, overseeing the Domestic Intelligence Service, before becoming Justice Minister, Defense Minister, and finally Vice President. He helped carry out much of the legislation he now promises to rescind. Under Robert Mugabe, I was never abducted for engaging in trade unionism. Under Robert Mugabe, I was never thrown in a maximum security prison for 16 days. We see him as a very insecure president, said Rosalind Hansi. He's paranoid. Zimbabwe is suffering from vast shortages of fuel, banknotes, water and electricity. Drivers typically wait 3 hours for gasoline, and civil servants line up all morning to receive part of their salaries in cash. Inflation rate of more than 175% has put some food and medicine beyond the reach of middle-class Zimbabweans. Shoppers emerged from a Harare supermarket complained of a 7-fold rise in the price of bread since this time last year. We can't afford to buy groceries, says Jonathan Tiripano, a 46-year-old window frame manufacturer who has said he's gone without breakfast. His family has stopped buying meat, bread and milk and will survive mostly on vegetables and ground maize. He says we can't cope. The economy is going to be fixed through a process, he said. These things cannot be done overnight. 29th of July, I said Zimbabwe is a laboratory experiment with inflation last clocking 176%. There is a straw and camel's back moment, but predicting that moment is always a fool's errand. 21st of January, I said what is clear to me is that Zimbabwe is at a tipping point moment. The point I'm seeking to make is that there is a correlation between high inflation and revolutionary conditions. Zimbabwe is a classic example. October last year, I was saying the government's voodoo economics, where it spent $1.3 billion pump priming the economy ahead of the election, money it did not have, was the straw that broke the camel's back. Rwanda has been upgraded to B+ on strong economic prospects, outlook stable. Ethiopia's earnings from exports in the current fiscal year stood at $2.67 billion, declining 5.98% from the year before. Previously about Ethiopia, its centrifugal forces are working against the mercurial Prime Minister Abiy's agenda in Ethiopia. The premium investors' demand to hold South Africa's dollar bonds rather than US treasuries is almost twice as much as the average for investment-rated emerging markets. Wider than the spread for Brazil, which has a non-investment grade rating from Moody's, S&P and Fitch. As I've said previously, I'm keen to buy the China EM negative feedback contagion loop, which means shorting the ZAR. Average local currency yields for emerging markets have been falling. South Africa's have been rising. South African all shares up 5% year to date. Dollar Rand has an extension target of 16.25 according to Sun Chartist. Egyptian pound 16.5875. EGX30 up 8.78% year to date. Nigeria all share down 13.12% year to date. Ghana Stock Exchange minus 8.7% year to date. Kenya's private sector credit growth has had an average of 13.35% in the first half of 2016 before the interest rate cap. Thereafter, second half of 2016, 4.9%, 2017, 2.4%, 2018, 3.3%. Housing finance puts 22 billion shillings of customer houses up for auction. Property markets under pressure. TPS Serena reported first half earnings. Revenues were up 0.742%. Profit before exchange difference, interest, depreciation, results of associates and taxation surged an eye-popping 14,806%. However, they still reported a loss after tax of 160.687 million, loss per share of 0.97 versus 1.12, so narrowing the loss, and cash equivalents at the end of the period was negative 346.668 million. Talking about a consistent return of confidence from the foreign leisure market segment to Kenya and indeed across the wider East African region. Talking about the seasonal nature of the tourism industry, financial performance for the first half should not be taken as a basis for extrapolating a full year's forecast. Final phase of redevelopment of Nairobi Serena is substantially completed and expected to deliver once again incremental revenue going forward. They always exhibit a second half skew. Nairobi Serena should bounce second half and earnings going forward. It's a valuable but undervalued franchise. This is a photograph of Hannah and Nishat riding along the lake shore at Elementaita. This is the photograph of the swimming pool at the Mombasa Serena. There's a link to an interview I did a few years ago with Mahmood Jan Mohammed, the managing director. And finally, a photograph of Lake Elementaita. Kenya shilling at 103.20. Nairobi all share up 5.43% year to date. NSE 20 down 10.24% year to date. Thank you for stopping by.